Okay, so to help decrease anxiety, we can talk to God. To help decrease anxiety and depression, I can talk to myself. Going back to my story at the beginning, if I had been talking to myself and recognizing even what I was feeling, that's even that second one. What am I feeling right now? And what do I need? If I'd been having that conversation with myself, I would have realized I was feeling anxious. I was feeling overwhelmed. I was feeling exhausted. What did I need? I needed to communicate that to my kids. I needed to take that nap and just catch my breath. I needed to stop pushing myself beyond my limits. Okay, so back to following my notes. Talking to myself, I can ask, what kind thing can I do for myself? Again, what am I feeling right now? What do I need? Who can I reach out to for support? This is huge. I know for myself, when I find someone safe to talk to, sometimes nothing changes about the situation, but just being heard and validated can be so very powerful. You do have to be mindful, though, of who you're talking to. Sometimes people may just not have the people skills yet to know how to validate you and listen to you. But again, for myself, for my clients, for my friends, for so many people I hear, just talking about it makes me feel better. John Cloud and Henry Townsend share a story of two men. They were very prominent businessmen. They both lost their jobs. As a result, both of them, their wives left them. One of the gentlemen got with his friends and he made them promise him that each one of them would take turns daily taking him to lunch. And they had to pay for it. The guy didn't have any money. At the end of a year, this gentleman was back on his feet and was doing well. The other gentleman did not reach out for help. He was not talking with anyone. I think the story goes he actually slipped into alcohol and became an alcoholic after a year. So support is so important. God's made us for relationships. So who can support you? Counselors, coaches, life coaches, church groups. Oftentimes there are small groups that we can attend at church. And who are friends? Sometimes maybe someone who's not close by, but that you can talk to over the phone. I have several friends and a cousin. We've been using the Marco Polo app, and I am amazed at how using that app and living a video and communicating is actually making me feel like I've interacted in person with these individuals. So you can think outside of the box for that as well. This next one is, what is my rhythm? I learned this from Jerry and Pete Scazzaro. They wrote a book. It was originally called I Quit. Then it was Jerry learning to quit things that were really sucking her life of having joy and peace and were creating anxiety. So she tells a story of learning what your rhythm is. Jerry's grandmother could decide in an afternoon that she wanted to have a dinner party, and she could invite 20 people to her dinner party. Jerry thought she was supposed to be like her grandmother and be able to pull something off like that. But what she realized is it was really kind of creating bitterness. She had worked all afternoon. They were hosting a gentleman from out of town. She worked on this amazing meal. When the gentleman got there, he had already eaten and just wanted coffee. So she really felt frustrated and probably bitter. What she learned is that wasn't her rhythm to make all that food. Her preference would be to buy a store-bought dessert and serve coffee, but really interact and visit. So learning what your rhythms are and paying attention to, is this how God made me? I function, or am I trying to be somebody else and function in their rhythm? Oftentimes that helps me. And if I'm anxious or feeling overwhelmed, even down, asking myself that question, what's my rhythm here, and functioning in that has helped me. Okay, so here's some brainstorming ideas. When I have felt at the end of my rope, I have done all of these. Taking an Epsom salt bath. And I was taught just to add up some drops of olive oil and or essential oil, and that just becomes a lovely experience. Music. Music is so powerful. You can play peppy music, relaxing music, worship, etc. There's all kinds of different genres. Even as I'm looking at these notes, I'm reminded in Colossians about giving thanks, singing in hymns. It's amazing what God tells us in his word to do. Of course, it doesn't tell us in there, but we are so fearfully and wonderfully made. By giving thanks, by singing, we are actually releasing what I would call happy chemicals in our brain, dopamine, etc. I can't even remember these great chemicals off the top of my head, which helps fight off cortisol. Cortisol is what we release into our brains when we're stressed. So in God's word, just giving thanks, listening to music, playing music can help with dopamine and those happy chemicals that make us feel better. I've recently discovered JJ Heller. She has a podcast series called Instrumental. Those have been such a blessing to me. Listening to other people's stories and how God has worked in their lives. Matter of fact, again, I was going through a really tough time. I was by myself and I thought, what can I do? I listened to her podcasts and they really encouraged my heart. In Revelation, we read that they overcame the enemy by the blood of the Lamb and the power of their testimonies. So hearing other people's stories who've been in really hard places is a way to encourage ourselves and to feel more hope. I've listed her podcast, but what Bible teachers can you listen to find encouragement? TED Talks. I mean, there's just endless possibilities of things that you can do to be kind to yourself when you're down, things that you can listen to. Kim Avery, I'm in her group coaching. She shared this about comparing. Comparing can really add to feelings of hopelessness, despair, and depression for me. But she shared, when you compare, remember that what God's done in someone else's life, he can do in yours too. So maybe somebody does look joyful and I'm feeling down and out. I can remember, what? If God can give that person joy, he can give it to me too. So I encourage you not to compare, but if you catch yourself or if I catch myself, I'm going to remember that God is capable of doing those things in my life too, and even request them. As I said there in my notes, it can make you feel despairing when you compare, like there's something wrong with me. So instead, do the Kim Avery trick. Okay, journaling with God. That's something kind that you can do for yourself. Just writing out, here's what I'm feeling. Even pause and listen to what he says back to you about how he sees me, hears you, how he understands what he wants to do. Again, he loves us. He cares for us. The kind things that we can do for ourselves are getting in nature, experiencing beauty. I know we're getting ready to enter into colder months, but sometimes just even, again, going for a drive, seeing trees. I was at the Walmart parking lot today in the Church of the Yukon working on my notes for you guys. But I looked up and I saw this tree. The sky was so blue. I just treated myself to a few minutes of just staring at that tree and looking at the sky. And it really brought me pleasure. Kind things we can do for ourselves are play. In the American culture, we are just stretched beyond capacity. And so sometimes just stopping to play, it could be a jigsaw puzzle. The other day, I played solitaire with real cards on the table. Someone I recently listened to said, do real things and limit your screen time. So being kind to myself or doing things that are soul filling. Again, from Jerry Scazzaro, I heard, do those things that bring you joy. Give yourself permission to do those things and take a break from work and making decisions and planning, etc. 16 minutes of doing nothing. Dr. Caroline Leaf talks about just sitting there, staring at the sky, lying on your bed, whatever it is, give yourself 16 minutes, not looking at your phone, your computer, anything, not talking, just 16 minutes of nothing can be so rewarding and kind to ourselves. It's interesting. Sometimes 16 minutes is really long when you're trying not to do anything. Sometimes even just a couple minutes of just closing my eyes and breathing can be helpful. Put on comfortable clothes. One of my personal favorites. Take a delicious nap. Movement. Movement is so good to help us feel better. I know when I lost my dad, I was, couldn't even tear up. That's been several years ago. But after he died, I just went for a walk. And I was hurting so badly, but just that movement helped me to feel better. Also, there again, got into nature. I saw a bird and I felt some real peace as I went on that walk. Okay. Avoid comparing. Oops, I got that in there twice. And again, just a change of scenery. So take a minute. Again, I've thrown a lot out at you guys. This isn't to overwhelm you, but what, if anything, might you want to try in regards to communicating with yourself or doing something kind for yourself? I almost hesitate to say this, but I don't want to throw the flow off. Something I forgot to share with you guys. I have a client who I work with. She's wonderful. Back up in our notes when I was discussing who can you reach out to for support, she was going through a really rough time. She called everybody who has people available 24 hours for prayer. So radio stations, Focus on the Family. I've called them before. They actually have counselors that you can talk to for free. You have to schedule an appointment and they'll call you back. But those people on the front lines, they're there to talk to you and probably pray with you. So, sometimes it's in the middle of the night or whatever. I encourage you to reach out to these places with prayer lines. Those are some people you could reach out to. Talking to others. Expectations is an area that can cause some real havoc in our relationships, which can really increase anxiety and feeling hopeless. So expectations, there I have listed when they're conscious, realistic, spoken, and agreed upon. That's when we're functioning in a healthy way that can help us in our relationships. But when our expectations are unconscious, they're unrealistic, they're unspoken, and they're unagreed upon, that's when the havoc and anxiety can occur. Going back to my story again, I was unconscious that I had this expectation that I needed to come back after having been gone for my children and be Wonder Woman, basically. Yes, the expectation of myself was to spend quality time with my kids after having been gone from them. But the truth is that wasn't realistic. I was exhausted, overextended. So that just wasn't realistic. Spoken, of course, they were telling me their expectations. They weren't saying, Mom, our expectation of you is this, but they were saying what they wanted to do. But I had not agreed upon those things because I was pushing myself beyond my limits. So, especially in regards to the holiday season, just having a conversation with others, what are their expectations? Sometimes people get a little nervous when you use the word expectation. Maybe it could even be, what are you hoping to happen? Or what do you think will happen during this holiday season? That's a way to figure out what our expectations are. And then deciding, is that really realistic? I know some of you have lost family members during or close to the holidays. We're in a pandemic. We are in the middle of some trials in our own family, plus we're in the middle of a remodel. So right now what's realistic for me is just functional. The dry crust of bread. Having these conversations, speaking them out, and then figuring out what you can agree to. That's a way to really cut down on anxiety. I encourage you to think outside the box as well. You're figuring out what you're going to do for the holidays. Okay, boundaries. I don't know if any of you have ever heard a definition of boundaries, but just an easy one that I like from John Cloud and Henry Townsend is the description of a yard with a fence around it and then a gate. So boundaries would be kind of represented by that fence. It's a border that helps you know where your yard begins and your neighbors, where your yard begins and ends, and then, what's your neighbor's yard. So in my yard, I'm responsible, thankfully my husband is, for mowing the yard and taking care of the grass. And, we figure out what we want to do in our yard, what we want to have in our yard, what we don't want to have in our yard. I'm not responsible for my neighbor's yard or what choices they make to have in their yard. We have a gate. The gate is so you can come and go into the yard. It's not a wall. Sometimes people, I think, get freaked out about the word boundary. Maybe they picture like the Great Wall of China, that it's something to keep you totally out. But that's not it. Boundaries are to help us love well and to love better. Brene Brown uses this definition of boundaries, and sometimes it seems a little less intimidating for people, but I can't take that on right now, is a way of setting a boundary. So it's nothing against the other person. It's just being aware and communicating what you're able to take on right now or not. And here's another one that I got from Brene Brown, determining what I'm okay with and what I'm not okay with. So for example, in my life, I'm not okay with being disrespectful to those that I love. I really wasn't okay with crumpling that basket in front of my children and traumatizing them. I am okay with taking breaks and doing things that protect myself and protect them. I'm not okay with people being disrespectful to me. I am okay with somebody realizing, perhaps they're having a tough day and they need to take a break. So knowing what our boundaries are can be very important and really protect us from anxiety and depression. So that's a mini crash course on boundaries. That next one is owning and doing do-overs. I had the privilege of getting involved with the How We Love. I usually say it fast and people think I'm saying a man's name, Howie, but it's How We Love by the Yurkoviches. And they talk about just owning our behavior and doing a do-over. So this is the example I like to give. When I'm anxious and not aware of it, I can be snappy. So usually when I'm snappy, that's when I realize, wait, I'm anxious. But what I can do is own that. I apologize. Please forgive me. I was snappy. I'm feeling anxious. Let me do that over. And then I can say, hey, whatever it is I need to communicate. Again, in the example of the story before, hey, let me do that over again. I just crushed a basket. Let me go take a nap. You guys watch a movie. Stories, checking out our stories. Again, I got this from Brene Brown as well. I realize Brene Brown will not be watching this video, but thank you, Brene, and all you other dear, precious people for your help in my life. Renee tells this story. She and her husband are on vacation together. I watched this on Netflix. Maybe it's still on there. They're swimming together at a lake. She was a competitive swimmer, I guess in high school, maybe college. She's just loving swimming with him, so caught up in the moment. She just is even feeling affectionate towards him. Honey, I love you. I love that we're doing this together. Her husband said nothing. So they're swimming. She again feels this deep affection for him. And he's like, honey, I just love you. He again says nothing. So the story Renee is telling herself is, he doesn't think I look very attractive in my bathing suit. Like most of us, our bodies don't look the same as they did when we were younger. So she's got this story going on in her head. Well, because she's a wise lady, she talked with her husband about the story she was telling herself. As it turns out, her husband had had a dream the night before that he was out on a boat with their children. They were hit by another boat and all the children drowned. So while they were swimming, that's what he was thinking about. But checking out her story with her husband, she was able to cut down on probably anxiety and pain and feeling hopeless. So that's something we can do, is check out our stories. Sometimes our stories are right, sometimes they're not. But by checking them out, we can just really decrease some chaos, if you will, in our relationships. Another tip is be wise when you have conversations. So HALT, I think, is an acronym I've heard before. You don't need to have serious conversations. You want to halt having those if you're hungry, if you're angry, or you can just even put in parentheses, highly emotional, if you're lonely or tired. But the key is pay attention to when you have conversations. And if it's not a good time, you can come back to it. Also, sometimes when you're having a conversation, you might need to take time to get yourself regulated. Hey, I'm feeling kind of emotional. Let me take a break, go breathe, do some of those things, and what you can do to be kind to yourself on that previous area that we talked about. I got to say that previous page. Y'all don't have these notes. And then come back to the conversation after you've had time to calm down. Oh, okay. So in that section, what is something that maybe you want to experiment with and try in regards to your relationships with others? And you can jot that down. Okay. So I realize you all didn't have something like this, but I just wanted to kind of close with a visual. So I pray that God is maybe giving you something through all that I've shared. Again, I know I've shared a lot, but with God, hopefully you have written down just one thing you want to try with yourself, one thing you want to try with others, one thing you want to try. And once again, I give you special permission just to experiment. You are the expert of yourself. And so something that works for somebody else may not work for you, or vice versa. Lucy Hone, she wrote a book called Resilient Grief, and she's the person I learned that from. That, when you go through something really hard, just have to experiment and find out what's helpful or what's harmful for you. So I'll give you special permission to experiment and figure out what those things are in moving forward from feeling anxious or down or hopeless to having peace and joy. Well, it's been a joy to prepare this for you. Again, I have prayed for each of you that God would lead you and help you in moving forward with Him. And that's how I always close my video. So thank you for this time, moving forward in Him with you. Bye-bye. Forgot to take off my notes. Bye-bye again.